So I'm speaking to Johann König, German gallerist and artist with a beautiful gallery in Berlin, in a beautiful brutalist architecture building. I'm sure we'll speak about that, and also outposts in London and Tokyo. Welcome, Johann. So glad to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So before we go into some topics, Johann, give us a little update about the gallery. So you reopened, if I'm right?
We are open, exactly. We reopened last Tuesday, and we are giving our time slot to always one party, and so it's always one person plus additional people who they, for example, live with or are friends with or whatever, that to minimize the point of contact people have. And then it's free of charge, and it's half an hour time ticket, and it's only Berlin because London and Tokyo is closed. And but it also offers like a unique experience because people can enjoy the gallery for themselves with the peer they come with.
Yeah, and you're very close to a lot of artists, contemporary artists that you represent, and we've been hearing a lot of them in your talks. What is your impression at the moment? Before we go into that, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to, if we give us a theme, Johann, today, and we try to discuss only positive, to stay only positive, and try to discuss.
I missed it. We stay only positive, you said?
We try to look at the possibilities of the current situation and not, if I've had a lot of discussions today already about really difficult situations of designers and artists. And I think we're all aware this is really difficult for them. And I would be really interested in discussing with you also, are there artists that have found a constructive way to deal with it, or do they, draw some perspectives or ideas from that current situation that might lead to new work or new discussions among cultural actors? How do you see that? Or is it mainly really the big problem of creating income, selling works, etc.?
I mean, I can talk from my side. I really enjoy spending so much time home, and I mean it's changing, of course, but in the general picture, I really get used to having a certain routine and having repeatedly the same day over and over again, which of course at the beginning, I mean, it was like challenging to get along also at home with the kids at home and homeschooling and no kindergarten. But over the time, once you go beyond that, it's really nice to, I mean, when I think where I would have been this week, it's like crazy, I would have been in Milan, Cologne, London, and back in Berlin all in 4 days. And before Düsseldorf even, back to back. And that's even only
Half of the week.
yeah, and that's only this period, and then later on in June it would have gone even more intense. And now I'm only here, I go take a walk on the river here near to the gallery, and then we buy some ice cream, and then we walk back, and it's like I have the feeling I have more hard time to readjust to open again, and half the staff is back here, and at the same time it's limiting, you're not really, it's like now it's even, I think now it's even weirder than before. Before it was like lockdown, and it was simple as that, it was just like but now it's like half, it's like driving with the handbrakes on, because now it's like things kind of roll out again, but without really rolling out. So, but
artists that you're in touch with, how are they dealing with the situation?
I mean, I think the kind of annoying thing is that we don't really know how we are preparing the Emgren and Draxet show, which is a spectacular exhibition. And this is fine because we are making our own plans. But for example, Katharina Grosse, she's about to finish her big installation at the Hamburger Bahnhof. And whenever there are many parties involved in how to plan things, that makes it complicated. Because there you have the Senate, the Bund, the wider audience. So it's kind of like a salami approach of jumping from one point to the other until we really know how to move on. But yeah, I mean, Katharina is finishing this. Then Emgreen and Draxit is starting to install next week. Oh, actually, you know, I lost track. I don't know. I think 15th of May. Okay. That's the thing, you know, everything's changing the whole time. I just got an email from Art Basel, which it's like, I think they kind of like tried to explain that between the lines. I haven't really fully read it because it's so long. It doesn't really have one clear message, but that's the thing, you know, there's no clear messages right now. Everybody's in the limbo of what to happen. And I mean, at this point, we only know one thing for sure is that there's this only one cure, that we should drink sanitizer and get some light into the body. I mean, you know, this is the state we are in right now. I mean, it's totally insane. So I think we just have to see it all positive and make the best of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go into some of, you know, some more topics that we can really speak about, you know, and not speculate, like virology. So what I find really interesting about the program, Johann, is that you represent many artists where I see a certain interest in design, or in crossing the borders to daily objects, to habits of useful things. If I look at the work of Erwin Worm, Ken Draxet, Alicia Quate, Monica Bonvicini, would you agree to that? Something that those artists would agree to, or is it something that you say is important in their work?
Like, for example, this one here, the Emgreen and Draxet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's really like form follows function in this case. So it's titled Marriage. Mm. So it is like, it's two hand sinks with one like this, and the other one actually has a different detail over here, which is soap. And then you see that the in this case, I would say this relationship term, it's complicated, really describes it well here with the connected tubes. And then of course Claudia Comte, the Swiss artist.
Yes.
In this case here, you see it's a wood sculpture, but in fact it's also how do I do this? It's also a swing. So
I think there. No, you're swinging.
No, I'm swinging.
Yeah, works really get close to work that also contemporary designers are doing. It's not about solving banal problems, but rather about asking questions, sharpening your perception, telling stories through daily objects. And I think that's where both disciplines are really meeting at the moment.
This one, for example, is really like rooted in minimal art. It's Andreas Schmitten. So it's like a vitrine from window shopping, but then it's 3 vitrines in fact. And inside you have these, yeah, kind of like coffins or glasses cases, and then they're covered with almost like bed sheets or so, you know. And but interesting, it's glass in front. Yeah. So and it kind of like refers to an absent figure. So of course I would say a lot of it, but usually it has no function. Like, I mean, this is very interesting because it refers directly to design. It's a work by Lisha Quade, and it's a Kaiser Idel lamp, which is one of the most iconic lamps. And then you see it's about this transformation from white into changing the color.
Beautiful.
Or here also, I mean, this has to do with design as well. It's Emgren and Draxet, it's dirty socks, but then it's kind of normcore. You see, it's like this normcore sock brand, Umbra. Or this one also Emgren and Draxet. It's a lifesaver, but in fact, it's in Carrara marble, so it won't really help anybody from drowning. Or this is a work by Jeppe Hein, which is ideal. I mean, I'm not so sure how he would like that, but we have that in our, in our entrance area at home, because you can check on yourself and then you leave the house with a certain mantra.
Nice. Very nice. Well, you said that for you, the border or the border to design objects is that they are not functional. I would argue that also objects not having a function or questioning the function could relate to design, no? And have a meaning within a certain design context, because they might, the function of that object or that work might be to irritate you. Or that mirror, for example, it's still mirroring, it's still, but it's reflecting another message than just the one you can hang me on a wall and just see your face only. It's adding something. I think this very thin edge between a design object and an artwork is the most interesting part between the two worlds.
Yeah, but I think, like, when you think of the totems by Sotzas, I think they become sculptures. They are I think what makes art so special is usually it has not to fulfill a function like architecture or design has. So it can, like Franz West, or here Claudia, or many other things, but in I think in the first place it does need to, where design usually, and having a stool which you can't really use maybe kind of falls short of its purpose. I think, and that's why I think it's so. So great to work in the field of art, because it usually doesn't need to accommodate any needs of someone who pays for it. Like an architect has a Bauherr, has a commissioner, and designer friends they have to fulfill. It's like one more component to match. Where in contemporary art, of course, not really, but more. It's independent, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you can't imagine how many stools that are not usable exist in the design world. So I think the criteria of functionality is really also for the design world at the moment is very much questioned. There's a lot of designers working very conceptually, where I would say they are really rather working as artists than as designers. So I think this desire to cross a border and to maybe pull inspiration from the other part of the fence is very large at the moment. And I completely understand that artists want to keep the field in which they work rather separated from design, which I understand. It's
I don't think that they necessarily, like, for example, a great example is Joop van Lieshout, who is a very interesting artist, but also an amazing designer, product designer. I think he I think also he designed for Vitra and different other ones, but like not artworks, like really mass-produced chairs, which are an amazing, just have good industrial design. And anyway, I think more and more this whole differences and distinguishment of making what's art, what's design, and I think that's becoming all one. I think that thankfully it's losing up all these. I mean, I never was a big fan of having one discipline versus another one. I think in an ideal situation, it can be all at the same time. Of course, but of course the question is, if you have the clear necessity of an office building or a home or an art space or a work environment, the needs are others than if you don't have these frame, if you have these points to fulfill.
Mm. Well, we had an interesting question right now, which was, what about the mass production of artworks? Is it still art if if it's serially produced, if it's really entering, if it's leaving the sphere of the single artwork?
Yeah, I think that the chair, mass-produced chair, is not. It's not the definition of the chair. It doesn't define the chair because it's multiple produced. It's because it has a clear attributed function. Actually, that's kind of leads into an interesting piece over here, also again by Alicia Quade, where you see, in fact, this vitrine here,
yeah,
is clearly, you see all these. It has all these like powder in there, but in fact, I have all these texts to get over with. Let me see. It's in fact what we see here is another Kaiser Idel table lamp, but the table lamp just changed its shape, so it's still a table lamp, but it has a different condition now. So it's still this lamp here. Yeah, but it changed. She changed the condition of it. So she took all these parts from the lamp, and also this is my favorite here. This is Wolfram. You know, Wolfram is the name of the
very rare metal.
Yeah, and it's a wire in the bulb. So she deconstructed the lamp into all these elements, but it's still a lamp. So in fact, this is a design object.
Well, it's a design object, and it's a reflection on the questions of recycling, recomposing, reusing things, which have been largely discussed in the last decades, but we're still not there in producing objects that can be really easily recycled. So it's still a very complex vitrine that you fill with that.
But that's also interesting thinking about artworks. Probably artworks are the most sustainable products you can imagine, because usually they never get thrown away. So they are hardly disposable. Meanwhile, furniture and especially fashion, it's crazy waste production.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Johann, I wanted to speak about another topic, which is the architecture of your gallery. You have this beautiful building from the post-war era by Werner Düttmann, who was a former, how do you call that in English? The former city architect of
civil servant.
Civil servant, okay.
I learned that from Rem Koolhaas exhibition in Venice.
Okay.
I also didn't know that term. Like a civil, civil. What's it in German? Staatsdiener.
Staatsdiener, yes. So he was responsible for quite a while for architecture regulations in Berlin. He was an architect himself, and also realized a lot of amazing buildings in a kind of brutalist style, and I think you got one of the most beautiful ones. And I actually have to say that, you know, when we had our museum in Berlin, Johann, you know that we were also interested in going into that church because
I
it's
know, yes, I know. I heard when
quite a, you know, so there's this building, how it looked probably in the time after it had been built. And then you found it and fell in love. Was it spontaneous or
yeah,
how
it was really actually to the thanks to Arno Brandlhuber who, and here you see how it looked before we transformed the space, and here you see how it's now, or actually better, that's the Chinese here. So here you see how it, this is the opening of the church in the 60s, 64. So, and this is how it looked before we transformed it. And Werner Düttmann, he was a real crazy guy. He brought that, you know, he was so far over budget that the church had no more funds to pay for the interior. So he brought this cross from his summer holiday in Tuscany in his Porsche. And then also the reason why we can use the church now without a cross, because when he finished the church, they had no more money for a cross. So the first 2 decades, the church had to survive without a cross until they raised so much money to build a cross. So in fact, the building spent more time in its history without cross than with. That's why we were allowed to take the cross down. And Arno Brandlhuber pointed out this building to me and said, here, you should have a look at this beautiful building. And he already had the idea to extend this balustrade, also the organ, by the way. The church had no organ because they had no money left for an organ. And then Werner Düttmann, he painted also the Marine figure picture with his own hands because they couldn't buy one. So here was, here he had the idea to extend this table. You see, so all these pillars here, we have them because we were not allowed to drill, or not drill, but we were not allowed to make fundaments, so foundations. So all these pillars, they just stand on the floor, like without any support below. And yeah, shall I go upstairs?
Yes, if you want to.
Yeah, sure.
Main hall is incredible. So I think we have a lot of guests nationally, but they might not know it.
So, and we try to leave it as, so you see these stones, for example, they are all stones from the demolished building, not demolished, bombed buildings in the neighborhood. So this, here you see, this is how you come in. Hello. Here you come in, and then you see, that's our, here is our magazine, and here's our souvenir stand, and back there is the show by Jeppe Hein. And then you come in and take a ride, and the staircase is pretty much left as it was. Here we see the sculpture in front of the building by Claudia Comte, who actually just moved to Basel. So, and now,
I hope you have enough internet connection upstairs.
Yeah, I think there might be a glitch for a second in the staircase. You hear me?
Incredible, I think. It's when I saw.
So, and here you see what we built. You see, this is, yeah.
And I think this, you know, this sacredness, like in many of those buildings that have been built for introspection, for religious purposes, I think they also serve the purpose of really focusing on artworks. No, it has this same kind of meditative and focused aspect that you would want to have for an exhibition space, right?
I think actually what makes it really special is the pure idea of space. And and the space because of the space, you know, and not, and that why I think it's mostly interesting also for architects to build museums and churches, because it's really the pure sake of space. And here you see these are very interesting details. It's
open.
It's all open, and you see that it's also here the edges. I think we put some styrofoam in there. No, we didn't. Here you see the light go through, and what I wanted to say, so you have all these surfaces actually, you know, you have all these like surfaces, and the energy, interesting enough, it's our 5th anniversary now. It's not moving away, you know, it's always, whenever I come up, so here is this is the exit to the sculpture garden. But whenever I come up here, it really, the energy stays same, you know, so it's really always an experience to be here. So everybody is very invited and come visit.
What I find really surprising is, you know, that the churches often, or most of the time, had their windows to the sides. And what the architect here has been doing is to go rather for a solution that we know from museum architecture, which is light from the ceiling, and not having large openings to the sides. So I think that's an interesting turn that helps you now. You just have these very thin lines of light, no, on the walls.
You know, it's funny. Arno always said that in reality, Duttmann always meant to. He said it's not his design. He said it was always Duttmann that had the secret plan of transforming the church actually to an art gallery, which is somewhat funny, because when we acquired the building, there was all these letters back and forth, and Duttmann, he was really overcross with his commissioner, because he originally planned a glass door, and that's a total no-go. You're not supposed to have a glass door in a church. You know, there's some certain rules in how to build a church, and which was also very interesting is that the center of this building, in fact, is the courtyard, and that's also something paradigmic change, a kind of paradigmic change in building a church, because usually, of course, the main space is the center of the whole compound. But interesting is now it's like, what is it? It's like 6:30. At 10, between 10 and 11 in the morning, the entire wall here is completely flooded in light, because this is south. So the church was built in a way that it was really centered to the sun. So when the Gottesdienst, when the preacher man was like starting, it was like all the light is like behind him. And interesting is, before, when you came in, before the view of course went up, and now we built the floor, it's not like this anymore. So you see you come in, and it's really like a perfect museum space, even though we didn't change anything but building that table.
Yeah.
And that was so complicated to convince the listed building authority department. By the way, this is an solo exhibition by Jorinde Vogt. Yeah.
Well, that leads to the interesting questions whether museums have not been the churches of modernity. And in fact, as you said, a lot of architects wanted to celebrate the sacredness of space rather in museum buildings, where it is about introspection, about thinking about oneself, about transcendency. Would you agree to that? Do you still have the impression of being in a church or being in a exhibition?
You know, at the beginning, now we walk through Jeppe Hein's exhibition. You know, at the beginning, we really did not want to. We kind of wanted to move away from this. Here, this is the second exhibition space. It's much smaller, but it still has 6 meter high, and we really try to avoid white walls. This actually again has to do a lot with design. You see, it's
amazing, yeah.
Two mirrors differently folded. At the beginning, we really tried to move away from St. Agnes, which is the name of the church, and try to focus more on the conceptual part of the building. And but there's not much you can do, and it's also very great. I mean, it's such a positive place if you compare to, I don't know, a bunker or other things. And but I haven't been raised Christian, so I grew up. He was actually the council here, and these are the offices.
It doesn't resonate much, you know. I grew up in a very Christian, with rather Christian parents. So for me, this always resonates, and I'm always struggling with the question: am I still in a church, or am I in an exhibition space? But as this building has been built so perfectly, fitting conditions, I think it works ideally, and that's the beautiful courtyard.
Exactly. Now this is Sculpture Garden. Courtyard is on the other side of the building. I just wanted to show you the. I hope you hear me okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here you see how you exit when you exit the main space. Mm-hmm. You exit here.
Yeah.
And that was interesting because we made it like this is a concrete staircase, and Arno always talked about weiterbauen, you know, continuing the building, which was very difficult because usually in listed buildings you have to make sure that you can see what's new and what's old. This is Andreas Schmitten. Over here we have Tatjana Trouvé.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful.
And then here we see Erwin Wurm.
Yeah. There's one of the handbags.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes, beautiful sculpture, yeah.
Here's a small table for the kids.
And you're also living there, right?
Yeah, we live where the preacherman used to live.
Yeah.
And there we are again on the other side of the Behind. Why didn't you take that building back then when you looked at it?
Well, the conditions were rather complicated, you know.
That's very nicely put.
Well, you must know it.
It was so bad. I mean, if you look at this it looks like concrete, but none of this has so much to do with concrete. Then I don't know. Trump is fit for office. It really is like we had to replace every. It had to be complete. It had to be like deconstructed and reconstructed.
Yeah. But Johann, you found a beautiful way to reuse that building, and I think there's a few of buildings from that era in Berlin and all over the world, and I think it's probably a kind of building which often is difficult to reuse because it's, you know, it has a very strong character, and you have been also advocating for the so-called Mäusebunker in Berlin, no?
Yes, one important thing is that it's not only me, it's also my wife who was very essential in doing this, and also especially with the garden. Yeah. She was really here we see the staircase.
Beautiful.
And she designed the garden. I was very opposite the garden at the beginning because I thought it's a waste of it's too expensive, because gardening is so expensive, and I'm very happy that she sticked on doing it. And yes, I think everybody should sign the petition to save the Mäusebunker, because it's a spectacular piece of architecture of the Vitra style.
Yeah. And
here's because we talked about Franz West. Here's Franz West. Yeah. Who said to me that he is a IKEA for rich people. which I find very still. This is a prototype, the first transvest sofa he ever did.
Nice,
And
nice.
here, this is a year behind for the entrance. I mean, that's
The one.
kind of not too far away from design, I would say.
And so you initiated and subscribed to a petition for the Mäusebunker, right?
Yeah,
Which is in the former Western Berlin, a part of the University of Berlin, I think. No, it has been a test center for animals. No.
exactly. Yeah, of course, the history is not so nice, but in times of COVID, I think agreeable, eventually necessary.
Yes.
And it's it looks like a starship.
Yeah. So I think there's different ways, or there's appropriate usages like galleries, maybe clubs. In former decades in Berlin, clubs would have been probably the first organizations to use these spaces, no, to just squat them. But the St. Agnes would probably not have been appropriate. But I think, that in the future, I think there will be the question, how can these buildings be used? I think it's not enough to just sign a petition that they should be kept. We have to have ideas what to do with them. So,
oh yeah, we're working on this. We're working on ideas. But I think actually it's not so difficult to find possibilities in I think you need to go with the architecture and not against it. And I think that there always is a possibility of creating art spaces, studio spaces, and I think that this, for example, would be smart to do that.
Okay. Now we're in your own apartment, Johann, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you collect yourself. You have the Franz West piece and the Jeppe Hein. Would you call that a collection, or is it just?
I would say I buy. This is a young artist I bought recently. His name is Andy Fischer, who's not with. This is another Franz West lamp here.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a Friedrich Kunert painting. I mean, I buy art. I buy art, and I did collect for a certain time with a certain focus on identity related videos, for example. But I wouldn't really call myself. I don't know. These categories I'm not so interested in.
Yeah, but you grew up in the context of collectors and curators.
Oh yes, the Franz West is an inherited work. It's from my I did not buy that. It's I don't know actually how we got to it. It's a prototype. It's the first one he did. Yes, I grew up in an art household. My mother is an illustrator and my father is a curator. Back then it was exhibition maker. And then he was leading the Museum Ludwig and is an independent curator now.
Yes. I sometimes see him at the airport in Berlin when leaving Berlin to some fair. He's in the plane with me and many other people from Berlin flying around the world. You opened your gallery in 2002 in Berlin, rather young, no? So was it always from the beginning your intention, I will become a gallerist? Because I think gallerist hasn't been, well, your brother is a gallerist as well. Was this always the intention, or did you just say, I'm just trying it out and then see what comes out of it?
No, I think it was really, I wanted to work with artists, and I didn't dare to be an artist myself. So then so I have to log on to the electricity, and then I didn't. So I couldn't. I had an accident when I was a child, and I couldn't see much. And so the directest way to work with artists and with art in general was to open my own gallery, and that's why I did that even before finishing school.
Mm. I think, well, a lot of people have then asked you the question when you recently wrote your a biography about your work. How can you become a gallerist without seeing much? And then you had this beautiful response, I'm not collecting artworks or showing artworks, you're collecting artists, no? You're choosing, no, you're choosing artists, right? That was the quote.
Oh yeah, this is from the New York Times headline. Yeah, I think that's kind of limiting it a bit. It's more. I think since Marcel Duchamp again, which maybe kind of is rooted in design because it's a urinal transformed sculpture. So it was like defunctioning the urinal and repositioning it and its context into the museum. It was such a significant paradigmic change of how to see art. And Marcel Duchamp talked about the post-retinal experience of art, which means what's behind the eye. And that's why maybe a better quote is it's what on the back cover of the book says, the pictures in your mind are as important as the pictures on the wall. And I think since Duchamp, art is more than the visual image and what we see, the painting, or it's a lot about ideas and concepts and dreams we live up to, and a lot of the artists at that time I worked with, like Jeppe Hein, I started with, or Tour Greenford, or Tatiana Trouvé, they had like, it's very conceptually driven work, which of course has an aesthetic, but the starting point often are ideas.
Mm. So Duchamp basically shifted the production of the artwork from the canvas to the intellect, no, and to the perception of the to the spaces behind the retina. So that was the shift that came with Duchamp's urinal. But you're also exhibiting, or you're also representing artists that do real painting, no?
Absolutely, yeah.
So is that, are you still checking the visual presence of those works? Is it through discussions that you have with the artists, or through an exchange? I suppose you know them for a while when you start working with them, right?
Like, for example, I mean, this is I mean, I don't represent him, but this is an elephant stool. Again, here we are next to design and painting in one element. It's Nicolas Party, another Swiss artist who did all these elephant stools. So I don't know how much you need to see to understand this. Or this one here is a Norbert Bisky.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like an orgy or something, like a fest. You know, it's like hard to see anyway. And then this is Emily May Smith.
Yeah.
Again, kind of Swiss because of the cheese. So this is Michael Zeitzdorfer here. It's like with seeing or not seeing, I can't really differ if it has so much to do with the choice of artists. It's also not me alone who's running the gallery. We are 40 people in Berlin, and it's a lot of the artists who have joined lately are introduced by people who work here and with me, and I think we all see differently anyway, you know. If you have a full vision or not, you see, I mean, like Friedrich Kunert, who's here, he only has joined the gallery since a relatively short time. I always admired his work so much, and that even from a time I hardly could see anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just said you're 40 people in Berlin in the gallery. So you see the work as a gallerist as a teamwork. So you have do you have other people with you that are really involved in selecting the artists that you represent? Or how is the gallery structured?
Oh, so it's structured like a real it's like a company. We have like shipping department, we have uh, front of house, then we have after sales relations. We have directors who are selling the work and liaising with the artists and looking after them. Then we have in-house designers for working on the magazine. We have our own magazine. And then we have Tokyo and London, of course, with small independent structures. And then it's not really, we don't have like a curatorial board or something, but it's like all of us sharing ideas and bringing themselves in. And then we work a lot on big commissions, like realizing that's often not so visible, but we do a lot of we're working on a subway stop in Qatar right now, and on a harbor project in Miami, and we work on a big public art project in Hong Kong. So we work internationally with a lot of large scale projects, like the Claudia Comp, maybe you saw in front, is kind of a glimpse of it. And
would you make a prediction already how the art market will change under the current situation? I think we're still in a phase of observing and learning, but we know that a lot of the fairs had to be cancelled. What would be your take on that at the moment? What might change?
I think that there will be definitely a change on the art fair ecosystem, and I hope that there will be a bigger responsibility. Like, I find that the connecting points of how we deal with the conversations we have right now, which is also triggered through COVID, but I think that we don't really connect yet the points of COVID and the limitation of traveling and doubting the needs of traveling and shipping everything to Hong Kong for 5 days to then sell it back to my clients in Europe, you know? So I think we need to, I think this will have been, and maybe the longer this whole thing goes on for, the more, I mean, I think it's also very traumatic what happened in Europe, that all these borders were sealed off from all these European Union countries to each other, and I think that the globalization in general is a good thing, and it brings people more together, but it comes, of course, at a price. And I just think we need to rethink how necessary some things are, because I still do that it's worth it to ship stuff all over the world for doing exhibitions. But the question is if a trade show is very necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sustainability, yes. If you do it for 5 days and then probably ship it back, it's a different carbon footprint or a different sustainability than if you ship a traveling exhibition that is shown for 4 months or 5 months in a place. No? That's what.
And also what it brings to a certain audience and infrastructure. You know, I think that's why we opened the gallery in Tokyo, because I think it's way more. You know, like an entire exhibition always tells us more than a art fair booth. But of course, still we do it. I mean, I'm kind of very sad that Art Basel is not happening, because not only because of we do a big chunk of our turnover there. I really love it. I love to go to Liste. I love the Rhine. I love Vitra, this great brunch you always do. You know, I like to meet so many great people at the same time. I like to you can inform yourself with this of what are the tendencies and so on. So there are great things to it, but maybe we don't need so many of those. But that's always the market to decide. It's like, I mean, I'm who am I to say this? Because we totally drove it and did all these 24 fairs a year, or I don't know how many, 20. I don't know. We didn't count even.
Well, I think it's not only the market that should decide. I think it's also up to us, up to the galleries, to the museums or collectors purchasing. I mean, they also have an influence on how the market is working, which format it may take. But maybe there's ways to keep what you're mentioning, the importance of getting together, of exchanging, of having debates without the carbon footprint and the shipping around the world globally that we had in the past. So I think that's something that a lot of people are thinking about at the moment. I think that discussion will go on even when the Corona crisis is more or less over. Then we'll still have debates about climate change and many other aspects, which will still be there. And we might even be more sensible for it than before, because we know that we can change. If it's necessary, if it's dramatic, change is possible. But you're driving it. I mean, you have to choose the formats that work for you as a company. You're an entrepreneur, and you have to find ways to reach your clients and the collectors.
Sure, but of course, it's always a community effort. Mm-hmm. But all of us have our own responsibility in our sphere, so to speak.
Johann, shall we take some questions to
finish? Of course.
Let's see what's all right. So let me see.
Oh yeah, Claudia kommt. Salt and pepper, absolutely. That's in between all of this. I'm just looking through the comments.
Yeah. Well, does the value of art get affected in the times of pandemic, since its necessity would diminish?
I think that the necessity. Oh, sorry.
I'm sure you don't agree.
No, I think that the necessity of art was never higher than it is now. I mean, you read a book, it's art. You watch the Netflix, it's art. You whatever you do, you listen to music, it's art. It's all art. So I think that right now art hardly got more appreciation ever than before, and I think in talking of commodities, like art as a commodity, of course, some of it goes up in price and others go down in price, depending on probably prior crisis situations. And in general, so far, and what I've learned from two crises I've been through, I mean, like the .com crisis, when I just opened the gallery, I didn't really notice, because when you start, it's a crisis anyway. And then the financial crisis in 2009, 2008, we're going to be fine, I think.
Well, I think the value of art is not only the prices that you can realize, but it's the value for all, right?
But I don't think that the appreciation will diminish at all. I think right now the appreciation for art is higher, but a lot of people don't really notice that it's art, maybe, or an artistic practice.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Let me see other questions.
And by the way, what we earlier talked about all these the differences between all these disciplines. I think with what you did with Virgil, for example, showed. I mean, he started to mix it all up and to don't give too much about all these categorization of what's what, and I find that very refreshing, and I find that totally overdue in the art market.
Mhm. Yeah. Another question, do you think there will be a new focus on locality and regionality in art or among artists?
I mean, I do think so, and I think actually that has been the case already. I mean, we just because of Chiaro Shiota just joined us a couple of months ago at the gallery. She's a Japanese artist born in Japan, living in Berlin, and I just love to work with artists I'm working with, like really working with, like
Yeah.
from a day-to-day basis. And I think that we are just better at our job when we can work with them on site, you know, and like in a personal relationship. And so I think, and also I've been a big fan of regional fairs. So but I mean, for me, Basel is a regional fair, and Art Cologne as well. Um, um, yeah, I do think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's look at one last question. Um, Well, I had an interesting, I saw an interesting question, which is not so much going into the art world, but it's interesting to hear a thought about it, Johann. Question was, and I'm asking this myself as well, will there be a stronger tendency towards decentralization after Corona? You know, there has been this huge urbanization tendency over the past 200 years, where people were moving all in cities, which got bigger and bigger, and cities are the places where a lot of contemporary art is produced. But on the other hand, you know, there's this super interesting exhibition by Rem Koolhaas at the moment at the Guggenheim in New York, which is called Countryside. And he's advocating the idea that in the future, the countryside will gain importance because that's where space is. Today, we could add that's where we can practice social distancing easier. So might there be a shift towards living on the countryside because you are avoiding this density and this, the pollution of urban centers? What do you think about that, being in a city like Berlin?
I do think so, but within the reach of the city. So that's also actually what we are looking for right now. Is we're trying to find a kind of a piece of land which is near the city enough, there, but still ideally near to Berlin, but it could be also another metropole, but really ideally Berlin, where we can have a sculpture park and where we can create like artworks, outdoor artworks in conjunction with nature, and as a really way of contemplating and kind of get lost a bit in taking longer walks and kind of discovering artworks. And I totally do think so, but I think it needs to be. I mean, I traveled to Marfa just now, and it's like it's kind of far, you know.
Yeah, but I think that's more the concept of the relation, no? That you're really far away from everything, and the difficulty to reach it is part of the character of the place and of the preparation that you have to go through when coming there. But I think what you're mentioning is rather, it's not suburbia, it's further out, but still reachable with public transportation probably.
Or like an hour drive, you know,
yeah.
like, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're looking forward to seeing that sculpture park, Johann.
Yeah, so if anybody knows something, let me know.
There's a lot of land
Or we do the sculpture park inside Mäusebunker. That would be another. That would be another.
options. Well, thank you, Johann. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye, everybody. Stay safe.